Ideas for Impact, a new podcast where innovation meets sustainability head on. Let's take a fresh look at how we do business. Changemakers are innovating solutions to some of the toughest challenges we face in our world. In the process, they are creating their own mark on industry. Our guests are rebels with a cause. They are tearing down barriers, redefining success, and leaving a mark on their industries. Our guests are the disruptors who refuse to settle for business as usual. Join us to unravel the lessons learned behind their failures and their triumphs and uncover the hidden opportunities for positive change. Co-hosted by me, Joanna Buczkowska-McCumber, and my friend, Deborah Host. Money. We all have a relationship with money. That relationship isn't always good and certainly not always good for us. Trauma of Money, or TOM, is a unique financial literacy and psychoeducation program that brings together the psychology of scarcity and the fundamentals of trauma to help us reveal how trauma impacts the mind and in turn our relationships with money and financial wealth and ultimately affects all aspects of our lives and our decision making. And unlike traditional approaches to financial education that puts the sole focus on the individual, what can I fix about my own problems? The Trauma of Money method actually reorients us within a broader collective landscape that includes the deep exploration of societal and systemic trauma and how those affect our experiences in many different ways. I myself am an alumni and certified Trauma of Money practitioner. Highly recommend everybody take this program. If you've got money in any way, shape, or form, you should take this program. And I'm so excited to have the founder of the Trauma of Money program, Chantel Chapman, on our podcast today. She has such a bold and refreshing voice across the financial industry, across the educational industry, and is truly making an impact for so many people across the world. Welcome, Chantel. So exciting to have you on here.
I'm so excited to be here with both of you.
So let's dive right in. Would love for you to share your story, the story of Trauma of Money, and really what enabled you to get on this journey of impact.
That's a big question.
I know. Let's start with the biggest one there.
Yeah, the biggest question. So I created Trauma of Money, which is a professional development training program to teach mental health professionals, finance professionals, social impact professionals, HR professionals, really anyone who works with money and people. They would come to us and learn trauma-sensitive approaches to money. I created this for myself. And the reason why I created this for myself is because I had worked in finance for a very long time. I started as a mortgage broker at 21 years old. That was a very challenging career because I was so young that most people were not trusting a 21-year-old with the biggest purchase of their lives. So the only clients I was getting were people that were declined. And at the time, I didn't know this, but I'm a recovering codependent, and I usually kind of lean in towards the people-pleasing trauma response. And so when people were coming to me and I had to tell them, sorry, you can't buy your dream home, you're declined, I had a very hard time delivering that information. And so rather than saying no, I would say not yet. And I would go on this journey with them, teaching them essentially financial literacy and all the things that they need to know in order to eventually get approved. And that led me into a bit of a career pivot where I created a financial literacy education business. And I did that for many years. I started consulting for one of Canada's biggest fintech companies. I worked on Canada's first ever free credit score and digital mortgage experience. And I was doing really well with my career. I knew financial literacy in and out, but the behaviors that I had around money that were very unhelpful, they never changed the more financial literacy I had. They always stayed the same. And I had gone through an experience in my life where I was kind of put in a position where I started looking at some of my childhood experiences. I had made the connection between some of the trauma that I experienced in childhood, growing up in poverty, being a survivor of various types of abuse, that these experiences I had were actually what was behind the way I was interacting with money. So the way I was interacting with money is I would always say I would use my money as a please, love, and accept me fund. So I was always the one picking up the tab. I was always like, if you looked at my credit card bill, it would just be like a document showcasing different ways I was seeking external validation. Like, I'll buy that outfit to fit in here. I'll pick up this check to do that. I'll go on this trip when I can't afford it because I want to fit in. I was also under earning and undercharging. And I had connected all of these behaviors to the trauma that I experienced. And so I started on this journey of trauma recovery for myself. And every single time I would bring up money to a trauma therapist, they would be like, well, have you tried budgeting? Have you tried willpower? And I'm like, do you know what I do for work? Like, I teach budgeting. I know how to do this, and it's not working. And I had realized that there was a huge gap, even in like the mental health practitioners training, where they learn nothing about money. So I went on a multi-year research journey studying trauma, looking at neuroanatomy, studying addiction recovery. And it did not answer my question of everything that impacts the relationship with money, because all of those modalities, a lot of them weren't really talking about the systems that we live in either. So then I started studying community economic development and looking at the impact of the dominant economic culture on our nervous system. And I brought these areas of research together and I started testing it with different clients and running like small groups. And it was the method I was using was really impactful. It was working really well. And many professionals were coming to me, like specifically mental health professionals, being like, what is this? I need to learn this for the work that I do. And then that's when I decided I would create the Trauma of Money, the first cohort. And there's so many areas in the work that we teach, the model that we teach, that I'm not an expert in. So it was very important that I bring together a large faculty of all these different experts. And now we're coming into our 10th cohort. We've trained thousands of professionals in the method. And yeah, that's a little bit about my story.
I think your story is so clear to me. Like, the work that you're doing matters so much. Everybody could probably benefit from going through some aspects, if not all, of everything that you've put together for the Trauma of Money. It sounds like what I'm really interested in hearing about is not why you do it, but how you do it. Like, what is it that inspires you regularly to keep going? Because this is hard work. I'm sure there are situations that come up where you're like, oh, like I've overcome this and I feel like I'm going back to step one. How do you, as an entrepreneur, keep going?
Yeah, it is very hard work. Thanks for acknowledging that. I've learned a lot of lessons along the way of how to not have the work like impact my nervous system as much as it maybe was at certain times. And the reason why I keep going is because I know how powerful it was on me to apply the trauma of money method. And I know how it changed my life. And I hear consistently like folks have pretty incredible shifts when they engage in the work. And that's my why. That's why I keep going, because I know it can help people and it can support people. To be honest, like, I don't know any other way. It just feels like this is just what I'm supposed to do. And I don't know any other way. Everything that has brought me to this place seemed to unfold like so naturally, and everything kind of came together. And there was a lot of challenges in building Trauma of Money and getting to where we are now. And there still continues to be challenges, but there's also a lot of ease in the really important areas. Like, for example, bringing the faculty together that I brought together. That every single time I bring on a new teacher, it's like they appear and they're absolutely perfect for the community. And there's so much ease in it. I really cherish those moments. And those are the moments that remind me, like, just stick to it. It's important work.
I can attest to that being like a Trauma of Money alumni, and I've like sat in on other cohorts as well, in the amazing diversity and intelligence of that collective group of faculty that is in the program, but also in the community that's part of it, right? It's not just the faculty, but all the amazing people that might be practitioners, that might be doing it for their own personal reasons. And there's so much to that around this relationship we all have to money. In my work that I do with businesses, but also organizations, nonprofit organizations, impact driven organizations, you can see that those elements popping out in how individuals approach money, in raising money for their organizations, raising money for their impact ventures, and the difference or their approach to it versus somebody that's just coming out of the financial industry or somebody that's just coming out of like the tech or startup industry. It's so interesting. And specifically, the things that you talk about in your programming and in the core of your work is around this idea of like money and shame and scarcity, and really those things that have been conditioned in our brains and how we do things, and really stepping out of that and trying to break our relationship with those aspects that aren't beneficial to our long-term health or financial health, right? And there's so much impact there. Like you have such a tremendous impact on so many individuals. And I think that like has a network effect. We always talk about network effects from like technology startups and SaaS companies, but the reality is the work you do has a tremendous amount of impact across the world. And so I'd love to dive in and maybe have you talk about like how you define impact for the work you do in your company. How do you make sure that impact is always at the forefront of all your decision making?
Impact is something that I have to come back to a lot as someone who's running this organization that's growing pretty rapidly, because we have an exciting challenge right now. And that's like a lot of opportunities are coming our way, a lot of potential partnerships and pathways to go down. And I feel very lucky and privileged to be in that position. And I find the only way to navigate through that, this challenge of which direction to go in, is to go back to impact. What are we trying to do here and why are we trying to do it? Our impact for me around in Trauma of Money is very correlated to our tagline of decreased shame and increased discernment. Whatever we do, as long as whoever we're serving, we can help them decrease shame around money and give them more agency and choice by helping them increase discernment, that's where we feel we can have the most impact. So everything we do is are we going to be able to do that? Are we going to be able to move away from creating dependencies on experts and give people more agency and choice for the way they interact with money? And we felt the biggest way to make impact is rather than go out and train individuals, we can train professionals, and we can sprinkle our work into so many different types of industries, right? We have lawyers that do our training. We have HR professionals that do our training. We have people who work in social justice. We have social workers. We have people that write entrepreneurship curriculums for universities. So that's where it's okay, the impact is spreading because we're training these professionals, and we do it in a very non-prescriptive way, which means it can integrate in so many different places. And that's where we feel we have the most impact.
With your customers, with growing your business, you need to have these conversations. Someone needs to pitch what it is that you do. And in some of the conversations that we've had on this podcast, it's really interesting because although everyone that we're bringing on the show has an impact first business, it's not necessarily what they use to sell their business to the customer. So for you, do you find that your ideal customer is being sold and buying into what you're offering because you're pitching the impact, the what is going to come out of this if you buy into Trauma of Money? Or is it how or why you're buying into it that matters most? Which part of your pitch do you have to focus on to close that deal?
It's really interesting with us because we don't really do a lot of pitching. most opportunities or most clients or students, they actually come to us because they've been referred by someone else. So we've put our energy into creating an experience with whoever we work with, like whether it's in our main cohort or it's working with like a corporate client. We put a lot of energy and effort into that experience. And then what eventually happens is those folks who experience it, they're impacted by that. And then they go and basically tell other folks. And so anytime someone comes to us and wants to work with us, they know quite a bit about like the impact of trauma of money. And so I find that when we go into like a sales or a pitch or trying to close the deal, it's more giving them like information about how we work because they've already been told about the impact through the referral.
That's super interesting and a great way to like grow organically, right? You don't have to spend the time or resources to actually be focused on that if that experience has its own network effect. And having been part of it, I always talk about the experience and like, do you at all, work with money, have money? Like you should probably take this course, right? And especially if you're advising anybody about it. Obviously, like impact is so entrenched in the work that you're doing. I'd love to dive more into like some of the challenges that you have experienced as you grow your business, but are still trying to stay true to impact and really like the reason why you're doing this work. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered or are encountering in growing?
I think like decision fatigue and trying to figure out like what's the best place to put our effort because like I said there's a lot of opportunities that come our way and we have to decide like do we want to spend time on this or do we want to spend time on that. And also another thing too that's been a challenge is structuring the way our content goes out there with organization, like putting together like licensing models has been really challenging because what's been done around education and like licensing curriculum and things like that, the way it's been not done is not always really in alignment with some of our values in our organization. So we're exploring like, are there any new ways of building these models that's more in alignment with our values as an organization? So that's definitely a challenge. And then also my own personal self-care and supporting my own nervous system on this journey of like running this organization can be a challenge because opportunities like come so quickly and I just have to make sure that I don't fall into like old patterns that I've worked so hard to do some healing around of like people pleasing and things like that. So that's definitely ongoing work, which I think is very much related to what we say in trauma of money. Like you can't like fully get rid of some of the patterns that have been unhelpful, but you get better at recognizing them and you don't maybe default into them as quickly and as easily. They don't always totally go away.
Do you have any goals? Like it sounds like there's a lot of things that come to you. And I guess in terms of this question around goals, personally, if stuff comes to me, I'm like, ooh, that sounds good. And so whatever idea I had, I'm now like, maybe I should rethink that and pivot because I really like what that sounds like. So do you have anything without your like, this is where I want to see trauma of money go in the next 5 years. This is how I want to see this grow. Or no, we are good. I want to just stay put. Like, what's your short-term plans?
Well, we have a big goal and our short-term plans are like working towards this big goal. But when you go and buy food at the store and there's like a stamp that says like organic, we want that stamp to be on businesses, but it says like trauma of money. And kind of like B Corp in a way, but mostly for financial institutions to show that they've done some work around the trauma of money method and they've integrated it into their organization.
That would be incredible.
Right?
It really would.
right?
I like that goal. And then what about you personally? You talk about the need as an entrepreneur and working in this space to also give some time to yourself. What happens as you hit these goals? Like, do you have personal goals for where you want to take the business? Is there something else in your mind that you're like, I kind of also would want to add this layer in? What are you thinking about?
I would love more space to be able to do more research, because that's something that I absolutely love to do. So sometimes I can get really in the like building the business and running the business that I don't get time to like develop the new thing that we're teaching. I will always make time, because I always want to make sure that Trauma of Money and our content is always evolving. I would love to get the organization to a point where I had a bigger team where I could step away and do more research focused things.
That's great. Like it's always that conundrum where as you grow, it's amazing, but it also like just carves into the time that you have of why you really got into this work, because you really enjoyed it, or you loved creating the solutions in Trauma of Money or elsewhere, right? And as you grow, it's like you have to figure out where your time is best used. And how do you get back to that original, like the thing that you really love when you know you might not have like all the time in the world anymore to do that? And super interesting on the, the Trauma of Money certification or seal. And I see that like, and like even things like venture capital and private equity and like all of these spaces that aren't necessarily even created to benefit the majority of people. How can we actually think about money in a different way? Because that money does have a massive impact in our economies and on individuals, obviously founders. In terms of how you think about impact as well, to dive deeper into this, do you measure impact? How do you really think about the long-term vision and narrative around talking about the impact that you create? Obviously, like a certification is amazing, but what is that future state of impact when you're successful with Trauma of Money?
Actually don't do a lot of measurement of impact. One of our teachers in Trauma of Money, you know her, Joanna Ondine. Ondine is one of the folks who works in the flourishing business model design or canvas. And one time Ondine sent me an email and she had like a calculation of our impact from students. She's like, well, if you've trained this many people and then this many people have probably touched this many people, like your impact is this. I was like, wow, like I've never thought of that at all. I find it fascinating. It's not really my way to think about it like that. I kind of I wake up every day and I commit myself daily to the things that I'm like deprogramming from and in recovery from, which is one of them is colonization. One of them is codependency. One of them is trauma healing. And some of them are connecting to more like of my spiritual beliefs. And in that daily commitment to recovery, part of that is connecting to integrity and the impact that I want to have in the world. It's not something that I think about like, I want to like be able to do this and touch this many people in the world. I don't think about it that way. I just think about it in like every single decision that I make. Is this in alignment with my values? Is this in integrity? And does this match what we're trying to do here? And I feel like the impact will just naturally come if it's like in alignment with the values that I have and
being driven by those, most certainly. That is so important. And many of the wonderful people that we've had a chance to talk to on the podcast sort of have that very similar character trait of like, hey, I'm driven by this internal reason for being and doing this work that I do, which I think is so amazing. And I wonder, like, if you could just talk to us and our listeners in particular around, you came out of the financial industry. That is certainly like an area and an industry you're trying to disrupt ultimately. What are some strategies or tactics that you're using to really get in front of that community that quite often isn't necessarily open to new ways of doing things, right? And I think that it could be challenging, but what are some of the ways that you're approaching that?
So when I first started Trauma of Money, like our actual cohort model, I really thought that it would be financial professionals that would come and do our training, because that's where I do feel like we can make a pretty significant impact, is if the financial professional has an understanding of even some of the history around money, or how money and how trauma can impact the brain and people's decisions, they could actually cause less harm. I was very surprised that the number one type of professional that was coming to Trauma of Money was mental health professionals, not financial professionals. And it wasn't actually into like the later years that we started seeing more finance professionals come in. And I'm not going to lie, like there was a time where I'm like, why aren't all the mortgage brokers signing up for this? Like, I was a mortgage broker. I know you need this. I tried to get into that space, and I just wasn't having there just wasn't resonance yet. And so I kind of asked myself, well, maybe rather than like trying to force myself into a space that's not ready for it, I'm going to use my energy to nurture the folks who are ready for it, who have more resonance. And that actually turned out to be a very beautiful strategy, because all those folks that we put our energy and effort into, they became our marketers. Then you've got the therapist telling their accountant, you need to go do this training. And eventually they're coming to us, and now we're starting to see more people in the professional space. Now that's like our individual professional training. And like I said, one of our goals in Trauma of Money is to have like, imagine like the biggest banks in North America are like Trauma of Money certified. That is one of our biggest goals. Because originally I thought the only way we're going to work with a financial institution is if we go in and we do this full certification and training. And a lot of the financial institutions we spoke to, they're just not ready to go there yet, or they're not willing to make that investment for that type of training for their staff. What I decided to do is like, okay, well, what are some ways we can work with them that they're ready to experience? We'll do more shorter term engagements with financial institutions where we might just do a workshop, or we'll do a collaboration or on something, or, we just wrote a financial literacy curriculum for survivors of economic abuse that was funded by TD. So it's not directly working with them, but it's like indirectly exposing them to our work. And then we're hoping that same pattern where the folks that do work with us become like evangelists, and then expose them more to us so it's not so unknown. And then hopefully we can get into those spaces when they feel more comfortable with it.
What advice do you have for someone who's trying or might be in a space where they're disrupting an industry, similar to the work that you've done and that you're doing? Lessons learned, failures and successes.
Yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
would you share to someone who's like, I am trying to do changing a space that could really use some transformation?
You are going to feel shame. You are going to feel isolated. You're going to question what you're doing, probably a lot. And because of these feelings that are going to arise, it's very important to surround yourself with a community that shares your values. Because I'm constantly doing research, I spend time in different types of communities, one of them being the financial psychology community. And I have a lot of different values from some of the things that are taught in the financial psychology community. One of the biggest differences is I critique capitalism a lot. I critique the extractive and exploitive ways that capitalism operates. In the financial psychology community, there's a big focus on healing around money, but they haven't really looked at the environment in which we live in. And I've been in that community a few times, and the work that we want to do, we also kind of want to disrupt the financial psychology community as well, because we want to say like stop looking at the individual and start looking at the environment that we live in. I've been in that space before where I've made comments like, I don't know if being a billionaire is really ethical, like things like that. And the whole, like, I've been in a Zoom room where like everybody in there gets like upset at me. And I left that room feeling like, I felt a lot of shame and I felt like upset. And I felt like I was like floating and because I experienced a feeling of not belonging in a space when I shared something that was very important to me. And I felt so uneasy. And then I was so lucky because a few hours later, I had a trauma of money affinity group. And now I'm with my people. And I shared the experience and they were all like, what? And, like I'm like connecting with my people. So when you're in a system that is not working well and you're trying to disrupt it from the inside, it's very important outside of that system to have your community, where you have actually disrupted already and you're doing things different. So you can root back into that when you go into the system that you're trying to disrupt.
I think you sort of hit that point so well. It's going to be so uncomfortable. It's going to be hard, but there are people out there that are part of your community and we don't have to do it alone. We can lean on each other to actually like create that change, especially through all these moments that are going to be so uncomfortable and you might not feel like you are welcome in a place, right? And especially like the things you're saying. And I think a lot of our guests have sort of shared that sentiment too sometimes because they're coming in and doing something completely different. This has been amazing, Chantel. Thank you for joining us and, sharing all of your experiences and your wisdom with us and all our listeners.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for doing this work. I mean, this is a place where people can go to connect with folks that are in alignment with their vision if they're feeling that isolation in that pathway of disrupting.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope you're leaving with some insights, inspiration, and perhaps a spark of an idea. At the core of every story we cover lies the undeniable truth. What truly drives impact is the relentless pursuit of change, paired with a deep commitment to the greater good. We're always reminded that making a mark on the world is not easy and isn't just about breaking through barriers. It's about thinking differently about what impact means in our world and what is possible in creating it. Thank you for joining us on Ideas for Impact, where rebels with a cause redefine the meaning of what is possible. For more episodes that challenge the norm, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested, dive deeper into our journey at ideasforimpact.ca. Until next time, friends, keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible.